The Dark Phoenix has returned. Welcome back to Reading Every X-Men Comic Ever, the weekly series where I rank and recap X-Men comics as I read them in a journey to read them all. Uncanny X-Men 174 through 180 are the ones on the docket today, as well as X-Men Annual 7, and I also threw in Phoenix the Untold Story. All these issues were written by Chris Claremont, with John Romita Jr. doing the art for the main series, taking over for Paul Smith partway through issue 175. Michael Golden and Brett Blevins did the art for the annual, and John Byrne did the art for Phoenix the Untold Story, on which he also has a writing credit with Claremont. I'm going to do the recap for just the main Uncanny X-Men series first. I'll cover the annual and the Phoenix story after that. Let's get into it. This first issue starts off on the Starjammer's ship in space with Scott and Madeline. If you don't remember the last issue of Uncanny X-Men, it ended with a panel of Wolverine crying because his bride-to-be just left him at the wedding. That wedding doesn't seem to have put a damper on anyone else's relationships, and especially not Scott and Maddie's, who actually get engaged off-panel, but the question is not as important as the one that comes at the very end of the issue. It's a question that Scott didn't want to ask, but leads to a cliffhanger that directly sets up my favorite single issue of X-Men so far. Issue 175. That's right, the Dark Phoenix is back, baby! And she immediately begins torturing the X-Men. Not only physically, but also mentally, as she kills the entirety of the Starjammers and eviscerates the entirety of New York. Scott was actually her first victim, and while he didn't die, he came incredibly close. And upon waking, he deduces that Phoenix isn't actually back at all, and it's just Mastermind messing with their heads. Having figured it out, his main issue is then having to prove it to the other X-Men, which is difficult considering they're trying to kill him because they think he is Phoenix. We then get a great sequence with Cyclops outwitting his opponents using all of his tactics and strategy he learned from being the leader of the X-Men and training this group. His plan actually succeeds, and he convinces the other X-Men that it's all just visions. None of them are real, and they defeat Mastermind. And after this success, he lets go of Jean Grey, essentially, and ties the knot with Madeline. Once this debacle is finished and the wedding is over, Lilandra and the Starjammers leave to go deal with the Shi'ar civil war that's starting. Meanwhile, Mystique has teamed up with the worst person in existence to train her Brotherhood to fight the X-Men better. And all of this is because she is still in denial about why Rogue left, and is convinced Chuck had something to do with it. Apparently that training doesn't take too long, as she immediately sends them out against the actual X-Men as a distraction so she can sneak into the mansion and shoot Chuck. Rogue was unknowingly sidelined for this fight, so she was still at the mansion, and her and Mystique just talk about why she left and why she did it of her own accord. While that was happening, Kitty decided to do some crime and broke into the Baxter building to steal a device that can save Colossus. She ends up getting kidnapped by the Morlocks, who frame her death. You see, remember back in issue 170 when Kitty promised Caliban that she would be with him if he saved the X-Men from the remaining Morlocks? Well, Callisto's now found out about that and has come to collect and is going to wed the two mutants. Kitty then has to come to terms with the consequences of her actions while the X-Men show up to rescue her. While in the sewers, Kitty conveniently comes up with a way to save Colossus with the help of the Morlocks, provided she keeps her promise to Caliban. In the end, Caliban learns to let go and just calls off the wedding himself, because he realizes this is not where Kitty's heart is. That brings us to issue 180, when not a lot happens. Storm and Kitty have a conversation about life and the change and accepting that change, and then Kitty goes with Doug Ramsey to the Massachusetts Academy, with a whole plan in place where the X-Men will rescue her if anything goes wrong. It goes wrong. However, the reason the X-Men don't show up to help is they decided to go through a magical doorway in Central Park. This is how they're in Secret Wars. Now, the annual. And like all annuals so far, it doesn't connect to the main book really at all. This is supposed to take place between 175 and 176, and the only way we can confirm that is because Lilandra is still around. It doesn't matter though. This is just a wacky storyline about the X-Men chasing down a green alien guy known as Impossible Man, who is stealing all types of iconic things from around the Earth, including the mansion, all to try and become the ruler of his planet via a scavenger hunt. And it does not matter, because he does not succeed. The final issue I read was Phoenix the Untold Story, which is an interesting release, because it's primarily just a reissue of X-Men 137. But this has the interesting inclusion of the original ending for X-Men 137. This ending picks up right after Cyclops and Jean are defeated by the Shi'ar. With all the X-Men defeated, they honor the deal they made earlier, and Jean is subjected to a procedure that removes the Phoenix Force. But this comes at the cost of the rest of her mutant powers, making her a normal human. If I'm being honest, I'm glad this ending was changed. It just feels more anticlimactic, especially since that arc is so good. It's cool that they ended up releasing this, but I'm happy that it was changed. That's the recap done. These issues were pretty good. The annual was the worst of the bunch, in my opinion, which shouldn't be a surprise at this point. I don't even think it's that bad, it's just kind of dumb. On the flip side, you have issue 175, which, like I said, is my favorite single issue of X-Men so far. It ties with God Loves, Man Kills. It's that good. If you're curious on full rankings, here they are now. Next week is the first of many events with the original Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars. I know it's not technically an X-Men event, but it's a big Marvel Universe event, and I've never read it, and this gives me an excuse to, so I'm going to. Tune in then.